So we've got, we're going to move on here to our, to some of our updates. I want to start with our ESSER 3 fund plan. We've referenced that a couple of times tonight. Jessica Bazard is here, who does our Title I coordinator and among other things, and I think maybe duties as assigned. So thank you for being here tonight, Jessica. And Dr. Shane Phillips, and I want them to walk you through what our process has been. One of the challenges that ESSER funds give to school districts is about the public comment and getting stakeholder feedback. And so we want to walk through kind of what that has looked like for us, and also demonstrate to you the buckets that we're going to focus on as we finalize it. And the ESSER dollars are being finalized, I believe. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty on some of that this week because it's due next week. So we want to kind of show you where we are tonight and how we got there. So Dr. Phillips.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Little, Ms. Bazardin here, and I are here again tonight with you to talk about our progress on the ESSER 3 budget. So as a reminder, in March, the American Rescue Plan was signed into law, allotting $2.1 billion to South Carolina, of which Lexington One is allotted about $27.3 million. Now, this money must be spent before 2024. So, in order to plan for this ESSER budget, we solicited project proposals from district and school administrators, and these proposals fell into the following categories. And I'll talk to you about kind of what we did with this in a minute, but instructional staff, professional learning, instructional time or programs outside of the school day or the school year, building, construction, and maintenance projects, including personnel related to those, technology, infrastructure, and connectivity, safety efforts, projects and personnel that address social emotional wellness, and instructional programs, materials, and outreach to meet unique needs of students within the school day. So we asked groups of administrators, parents, teachers, support staff, and students if they could have 3 of these things, which 3 would they be in order of importance? Okay, so we asked them to really narrow it down, pick the top 3, and tell us which one's number 1, number 2, number 3. And so here is, if we look at all of those groups together, this is where that landed. Okay, so the top category by far of all was instructional staff. So providing personnel to reduce class size, to provide more instructional assistance to students, followed by those instructional programs within school to meet the unique needs of students. Then projects related to that social emotional wellness. Those were our top 3 overall, okay, if we consider the entire group. And you can see how the others fell out there as well. If we look at that by group, okay, and there you can see there's a small little group down there that said blank that didn't answer that question. But overwhelmingly, each group individually selected instructional staff as their top priority. And then, with the exception of 1 or 2, the second one was those instructional programs in school, and then the social emotional learning projects. So this is the feedback we got from our stakeholders about what their priorities were to focus on when looking at how we're going to spend this money. So right now I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Bazard, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the development of that budget.
Good evening. I'm excited to share with you tonight our ESSER 3 budget process and our draft ESSER 3 budget. Some of this will be familiar as we discussed the budget planning process last month. We really worked very hard to put together not just a budget for ESSER 3, but truly a program that will impact students for years to come. This multifaceted process began really back in late spring with the things you see listed here. These things kind of went back and forth. We didn't do them necessarily in order, as you'll see this process was fast and furious. So the Lexington One stakeholders received a survey back in June. Prior to that, we were developing the academic recovery plan and also developing the safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan. As those plans were finalized, we shared information about the ESSER 3 grant and the budget request process with school and district leaders. An important part of making any budget request was that any request had to be aligned to the two plans listed here. Another requirement was that each request needed to include how the expenditure would be evaluated for the effectiveness during implementation. Requests were made in two categories. One was a continuing budget priority, meaning that it had been previously funded in an ESSER budget. The other category was new requests that were not currently funded. A committee that represented all levels and departments was convened to review all budget requests. Then we met with all advisory groups to gather feedback on what they saw should be budget priorities. We then took all of this information and began to draft an ESSER 3 budget. There were several other considerations as priorities were discussed. We had to think about what are the human resources implications for each request. If it was a new position, was it even possible to fill the position? We also thought about an exit plan for 2024. So the funds expire September 30th of 2024. So we needed to be thinking about how that was going to happen when the time came. We also looked at the feedback from the ESSER 3 committee and the advisory groups and what those two groups recommended as priorities. Another point of consideration was what we did to continue funding the things that were already a part of ESSER 1 or ESSER 2. So the budget that is being presented is still in draft format. As students return to school, we recognize that priorities may shift. The categories presented are in order based on the priorities that Dr. Phillips just shared. So the first category is instructional staff. And you saw based on the feedback that this was definitely a priority for all groups. And you can see here that this budget represents this. You see class size reduction teachers, an additional instructional assistant for every elementary school, along with additional staff to support our vulnerable students will be included in our ESSER 3 plan. Next, the instructional programs, materials, and outreach listed here are included in the budget. Some of these are continuing requests, such as the special education curriculum and software, and others are new requests, such as the software that will be purchased to support the arts. And you see the other priorities listed here as well. Based on our feedback, it was clear that our stakeholders viewed social emotional wellness as a priority, and you will see that reflected here. For example, we plan to continue funding additional mental health counselors while also implementing some new supports for social emotional wellness. Other categories that were listed as additional priorities but didn't receive as much feedback as the others include professional learning and instructional time outside of the school day, So for example, part of our academic recovery plan is to support middle school mathematics. So we have prioritized professional learning to support that plan. Also, we had great success with our ESSER-funded summer camps this past summer. So we knew that was a continuation priority and plan to fund them for the summer of '22 and the summer of '23. Several continuation requests were funded for technology to include additional computer technicians so that each elementary school is able to have their own technician on site. We'll also have a plan to continue with additional housekeepers that we were able to fund through ESSER 2. You'll see here a priority that was discussed earlier tonight, COVID-related absences. We want to continue to be able to support employees through this time, so we appreciate the board's support with that item. So what are the next steps? So as Dr. Little said, the plan is due next Tuesday, August 24th. So we're currently working on the narrative for the plan, and we'll definitely have it submitted by then. Once the plan is submitted to the State Department, then they're getting all the districts in South Carolina, so they take time to review each plan, give us feedback, and then will let us know when it's approved. I will tell you that the ESSER, they're not a committee, but the ESSER, the ESSER people at the State Department, is what I'm going to call them, they are very responsive and turn plans around very quickly. Anytime we ask a question, we get a response within the hour. So that's exceptional. So we expect to hear pretty soon after August 24th. At this time, we'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
We were told in an email to wait until after the meeting to ask you a question. No, that's okay. Oh, okay, sorry. I do have a question. So Dr. Phillips said that these funds have to be spent by 2024. Is that correct? Okay, so I see a lot of additional staff included in these funds. So the additional staff that are hired, will they be told that their hiring is temporary, or will we have to find a way to continue paying for them?
So it really depends on the position, and I'm going to default to Ms. Price. You want to speak to that?
Sure. We really feel like at the state that we are in, most of those can be easily absorbed. So for example, the additional IAs at the elementary level, that's 17 of them, easily at the end of that process, if we know that's coming, we can absorb them, as you kind of heard by the vacancy numbers tonight. So yes, they will, all those positions will know going in. It's dependent on funding from year to year, because as she said, we may have to monitor and adjust each year as we go, but I feel confident that we could probably absorb those people in some way. Yes.
Great.
And so just for clarification, absorbing those people doesn't mean adding that FTE to the
Correct.
general fund when
They
it's
would
over.
fill
They would
vacancies.
They would fill a
Correct.
vacancy in the
Correct.
existing FTE of the general fund.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for clarifying that. Yes.
And then the one other question is, there was something on there about resources to track COVID. So is that additional staff, or like what resources do you need to track?
Yeah, so we have to report, and Ms. Price can speak to that as well. So part of that is is for additional staff to track COVID.
So on our end, so our HR department is responsible for all staff tracking of COVID. And so for example, over the weekend, we had about 40, 50 phone calls to make. And we do that, but in addition to our own jobs, obviously that's a heavy lift. So we have a temporary employee that does a couple hours a week to help us with at least the documentation part of that, especially as we talk about leave and pieces like that. So.
And I will say, I don't think that can be underscored, the amount of time and just I was talking with a school nurse that she was making phone calls to families, to her principal, she spent 4 to 6 hours on a Saturday, 4 to 6 hours on a Sunday, doing this kind of contact tracing and various things to keep the classroom safe. And so it certainly takes time and a lot of resources to do that.
Yes, we appreciate that acknowledgement. It does our admin team, that's pretty much what we do on nights and weekends right now.
This is a very small, it's not really on this, and I'm not sure if it's part of this. This just came up in a conversation. Actually, I think I was having with Dr. Little last week. And Mr. Warren and Mr. Salters may be able to address this. It seems like COVID funds are a great opportunity to replace all of our water fountains with bottle fillers. I mean, to me, I don't know that actual water fountains are ever going to come back as a thing that somebody wants to use to get water. Do we still have traditional water fountains in our schools? I know.
We do have traditional water fountains still in our schools, but we are replacing those as we go with bottle fillers. Most of the bottle fillers actually install above a regular water fountain anyway. So, but we
Okay.
are adding bottle fillers at each of our schools
Okay.
and strategic locations, cafeterias, high traffic areas.
Okay.
And they're used very frequently.
Just because, and I know we have a lot of water fountains that are closed, and just if there was a plan to eventually replace all of them, because I know that, we never really thought about it before, but water fountains are kind of gross. So.
And I think
We all survived them somehow.
Yeah, somehow. We have good immune systems now.
I think we also run into
Garden hoses too.
a code issue as well. So code requires, and trust me, for the doctor's offices that we build, the only thing worse than the floor at a doctor's office is the water fountain. And I wouldn't install them unless Lexington County required me to, but we're kind of required to. But and we ask for variances. We ask for, let us put up some water bottles and some different things. And now, it was code requirement that we had to install a water fountain. 2.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And moving on, I'm just going to say, first of all, I'm incredibly grossed out by the fact that the water fountains in doctor's offices, just as a reminder there, don't use a water fountain in doctor's office.
And don't eat off the floor.
Yeah. Ugh.
It's more of a pediatrician thing than an adult thing.